My ex-husband made me serve his engagement dinner, then his billionaire investor recognized the scar his mother tried to shame me with. My ex-husband didn't just choose the restaurant where I worked for his engagement dinner. He called my manager and requested me as his waitress. Watch me serve the man I had spent 11 years helping succeed. When I entered the private dining room with a bottle of Cabernet, Preston looked at my black server's jacket and smiled as if it proved everything he had told them about me. His mother looked even more pleased. There she is, Elaine said. I told the manager we wanted Josie, so it had not been an accident. Celeste Barron sat beside Preston, wearing a diamond that caught every candle in the room. Preston wore the navy suit I had helped him buy before his first investor meeting. At the head of table 12 sat Gideon Calder, the billionaire whose company Preston had been chasing for months. A thick Calder hospitality investment folder rested beside Preston's plate. I understood the arrangement immediately. They did not need me to serve dinner. They wanted an audience, while Preston showed everyone how far he believed he had risen above me. My manager had warned me not to upset the party. It was one of the restaurant's largest corporate accounts, and I needed the shift. My mother's assisted living payment was due in 5 days. Preston knew I helped cover it. He also knew I would rather swallow my pride than let him see me run. I stepped toward the table. May I start anyone with wine? Preston looked me over slowly. Gideon, he said, this is someone from an earlier chapter of my life. An expensive chapter, Elaine added. Celeste smiled into her champagne. At least everyone ended up where they belong. I filled her glass without spilling a drop. Preston had not called me beneath him when I worked breakfast shifts at a diner and evenings at the steakhouse so he could finish his MBA. He had not called me unambitious when I postponed hospitality training to care for his sick father, and he had not called me an expensive mistake when he sat at our kitchen table, signed a note promising to repay the $1,000 I gave him to start his company. Back then, he called the company ours. Now he acted as though I had never built anything except his dinner. Elaine watched me pour, disappointed that I was not crying. Josie was always good at service, she said. Preston used to have a rescue complex. I moved toward Gideon's glass. Before I could pour, Elaine reached up and pulled my hair behind my left ear. Her fingers exposed the small curved scar hidden beneath it. Let them see what Preston used to mistake for love, she said. A few guests lowered their eyes. Celeste stared at the scar but said nothing. Preston did not defend me. He leaned back in his chair. Josie, don't make this uncomfortable. Just pour the wine. It was the same trap he had used throughout our marriage. His mother hurt me. I was expected to smile. If I objected, Preston told everyone I was emotional. I placed the bottle on the table. You may insult me, Mrs. Vale, I said. You may not touch me. Elaine gave a soft laugh. Don't be dramatic. She lifted her hand toward my hair again. A chair struck the floor at the head of the table. Gideon Calder had risen so quickly that his napkin slipped from his lap. Take your hand off her. Elaine froze. But Gideon was not looking at her. He was staring at the scar behind my ear as though he had seen something impossible. Where did you get that mark? He asked. I've had it as long as I can remember. Preston gave a nervous laugh. Gideon, I apologize. Family history. Gideon ignored him. He asked the manager to send another server, then pulled out the empty chair beside him. Ms. Wren, please sit down. I stayed where I was. Why? As I straightened, the chain beneath my blouse caught on my collar. The old silver pendant my mother had given me slipped into view. Gideon's face lost its color. Where did you get that? My mother gave it to me after she adopted me. She said it was found with me. Preston stood. Whatever she's trying to do, it has nothing to do with our investment. For the first time that night, fear crossed his face. Gideon reached inside his jacket and removed a worn leather case. Inside was another piece of silver, the missing half of the same sun-shaped crest. He placed it beside my pendant. The broken edges matched. Then he looked at my scar. My daughter had both, he whispered, before she disappeared. Part 2. Preston's fear vanished behind a cold smile. She knew you'd be here, he told Gideon. She planned this. Josie has always wanted money from me. I stared at the man I had once worked 2 jobs to support. You asked for me to serve this table. His face tightened. Gideon separated the 2 pieces of silver. This crest was made for my daughter, he said, and no one outside my family knew where her scar was. The room fell silent. He asked for an independent DNA test. I'll take it, but I don't want your money. I want the truth. Preston leaned toward me. Then ask your adoptive mother why she kept a missing child. The words hit harder than anything Elaine had said. Lillian didn't steal me. I called my mother from the hallway. When I told her about the pendant, she began to cry. There's an envelope, she whispered. It came with you. I kept it because the dates never matched. Inside was an old property form and a faded photograph. It showed me at 3 years old, holding hands with a woman outside a roadside motel. Gideon looked at the woman and went white. That's Ruth Mercer, he said, the nanny who disappeared with my daughter. Part 3. For a moment, no one at table 12 moved. Gideon kept staring at the faded photograph on my phone. The woman beside 3-year-old me had one hand around my wrist and the other gripping a motel key. That's Ruth Mercer, he said. She was my daughter's nanny. Preston pushed back from the table. This is insane. Gideon looked at him for the first time since the photograph appeared. No, what happened to my daughter was real. Then he closed the Calder Hospitality investment folder. Preston's face changed. Gideon, you can't let a waitress and an old photograph derail a business deal. A business deal can wait. The truth cannot. The restaurant manager asked me into the hallway. He looked frightened, not for me, but for the account. Mr. Vale says you disrupted a private event. Until the owner reviews it, I have to take you off the schedule. He requested me by name. He lowered his eyes. No, I'm sorry. That was how quickly Preston tried to regain control. 1 minute, he was afraid the billionaire across from him might be my father. The next, he was making sure I could not pay my mother's bill. Gideon offered me a ride, but I told him I was going to see Lillian. I need to hear this from the woman who raised me before I hear it from anyone else. Lillian was awake when I reached her assisted living apartment. The sealed envelope lay on the table beside her. I should have shown you all of it sooner, she said. When you came to me, you screamed whenever anyone asked about before. You were about 3. There was no real birth certificate. The woman traveling with you called herself Mara Reed and called you Josie. Ruth Mercer. Lillian opened the envelope. Inside were the faded photograph, a motel receipt, a bus ticket stub, the original property sheet for my pendant, and an intake form with dates that did not match. I called the county twice after your adoption, she said. They told me the woman had died after a highway accident. They checked the missing child reports they had. Nothing matched your name or birthday. Why did you keep this? I asked. Because mistakes don't. Stop being important just because. An office stamps them closed. Her eyes filled. If Gideon Calder is your father, I won't stand in your way. I took her hand. You are not in my way. Finding out where I came from doesn't change who stayed. But the next morning, Gideon placed an old photograph in front of me and the child in it had my scar. Part 4. The photograph showed a little girl, sitting on a kitchen counter, with a white bandage behind her left ear. Beside her stood a younger Gideon, his right hand wrapped in gauze. A glass panel broke in our greenhouse during a storm, he said. I pulled Josephine away. She needed 6 stitches. I cut my palm. He turned his hand over. A pale scar crossed it. The emergency room report described the same. Small curved scar behind the child's left ear. Another photograph showed the Silver Sun medallion before it broke. Gideon explained that his wife had commissioned it after Josephine was born. It split during the search for her. He kept one half. The other disappeared with his daughter. The scar and the medallion were never released to the public, he said. We kept them private to eliminate false claims. Then he placed a photograph of Ruth Mercer on the table. She was the woman from Lillian's Polaroid. Ruth had lost a child of her own and become dangerously attached to Josephine. The Calders dismissed her after. She tried to keep other caregivers away from the little girl. Josephine disappeared 3 days later. I agreed to an independent DNA test. The laboratory is chosen by both attorneys. No one accuses Lillian of anything, and nobody announces my name until the result is verified. Gideon nodded. I spent 36 years searching for a child. I have no right to make demands of the woman she may have become. The test would take several days. Preston used every one of them. By noon, people in the restaurant business had received an email from Vail Dining Concepts. It described me as a distressed former spouse who had staged an incident during a confidential investment dinner. By evening, a lawyer delivered an agreement to Lillian's apartment. Preston offered enough money to cover 6 months of her care if I signed for statements that I had no claim against his company, that I had never provided business capital, that I would stop speaking with Gideon, and that the scene at table 12 resulted from my emotional instability. I read the pages twice. Then I started laughing, not because anything was funny, but because Preston had finally shown me exactly what frightened him. The Calder name was only half of it. He was terrified someone would examine the story he had built his company on. Part 5. I drove to a storage unit one had not opened since the divorce. Inside a plastic box were tax returns, old email printouts, and the yellow legal pad Preston and I had used when Vail Dining Concepts was only an idea. At the bottom was the promissory note, signed by Preston. The money had come from my savings and a small inheritance. I wired it into his business account after he promised repayment following the company's first major financing round. I also found messages calling me his partner, thanking me for creating his first vendor system, and asking me to delay my management program until we are stable. Why had I never forced him to pay? During the divorce, Preston told me collecting the debt would collapse the company and cost 23 employees their jobs. My attorney warned that enforcing an unsecured note could take years and more money than I had. Preston made 3 small payments, then stopped. At the time, I was helping Lillian recover from surgery and trying to rebuild my own life. I chose survival over another legal war. That choice allowed him to turn delay into denial. I gave the records to an independent business attorney. These papers may not make you an owner, she said, but they prove an outstanding debt and your operational support. She tapped Preston's investor disclosures. More importantly, these say the company has no undisclosed founder-related obligations. He lied to Gideon. She nodded. He may have lied to every current investor. The deeper childhood proof arrived the next day. A retired investigator compared fingerprints preserved from the highway accident with Ruth Mercer's old employment records. The woman who died as Mara Reed was Ruth. She had been driving across another state when her car left the road. I survived with minor injuries, but the papers in her bag gave false names and a false birth date. I entered emergency foster care as Josie Reed. The Calder case was filed under Josephine Calder in another state, years before child welfare systems shared records reliably. The private scar detail never reached my foster file. No modern conspiracy had hidden me. One woman's crime, false paperwork, and disconnected systems had been enough. On the 5th morning, the DNA result arrived. Gideon read the first page, covered his mouth, and slid the report toward me. I was Josephine Calder. Part 6. Gideon did not reach for me. He placed both hands on the table and asked, "What do you need from me?" Not what did I want to buy. Not when would I move into his house. What did I need? Protect Lillian from the story Preston is spreading. Correct the lies about me. And give me time. You have all 3. He looked at me for a long moment. I never stopped looking for Josephine. I believe you. But I'm Josie. His eyes filled. And he did not touch me until I held out my hand. The final Calder investment review had already been scheduled for Friday at the steakhouse. Preston expected to sign preliminary financing papers in front of Celeste's family and 2 members of his board. Gideon did not cancel it. He changed the guest list. When returned to table 12, I entered through the front door. The restaurant owner met me personally, while my manager stood behind him looking ashamed. I should never have allowed a guest to request you for that table, the owner said. Your suspension is lifted. The complaint is removed from your file. I thanked him, but I did not promise to stay. Inside the private room, Preston sat beside Celeste. Elaine was on his other side. 2 board members, Calder's attorneys and my attorney, were already seated. The same investment folder rested in front of Gideon. This time, there was a chair for me. Preston looked at my navy jacket and the folder in my hands. You've enjoyed this. No, I said. I've survived it. Gideon opened the meeting. Independent testing has confirmed that Josie Wren is my biological daughter. Josephine Calder. Elaine inhaled sharply. Preston looked toward Celeste, waiting for her to defend him. Gideon continued. Her identity is not the reason Calder Hospitality will make its decision today. Elaine found her voice. We had no idea who she was. I looked directly at her. You knew I was a person before you knew my last name. Then my attorney opened the folder Preston had tried so hard to keep closed. Part 7. My attorney placed the promissory note on the table, followed by the bank transfer, Preston's emails, and the agreement his lawyer had tried to make me sign. One board member read the clause requiring me to deny that I had provided startup money. His expression hardened. Preston stood. This was a personal loan between spouses. Then why did you tell investors it did not exist? My attorney asked. It was practically forgiven. Your own email from 8 months ago says repayment would begin. After this financing round, Celeste turned toward him. You told me she never contributed anything. Preston's voice dropped. This is complicated. No, I said. You made it complicated because the truth embarrassed you. Gideon closed the investment folder. Calder Hospitality will not invest in veiled dining concepts. One of Preston's board members spoke next. Effective immediately, the board is placing you on administrative leave pending an audit of all founder disclosures. Preston's face drained of color. He reached for Celeste, but she pulled her hand away. When did you start seeing me? She asked. Preston glanced around the table. Celeste. That means before the divorce. He said nothing. She removed her engagement ring and placed it beside the unopened investment papers. You told me she was trying to live off what you built. You were trying to live off what she built for you. Elaine accused me of using the Calder name for revenge. Gideon answered before I could. She did not need my name to deserve basic dignity. The restaurant owner confirmed that Elaine had requested me by name. My manager admitted he knew. I was Preston's former wife and still assigned me to the table. Elaine had spent years controlling rooms with money and manners. This time, neither worked. But the consequences were not magical. Preston was not arrested, and his company did not disappear overnight. The board began an audit. Calder withdrew, and other investors paused their commitments. For the first time since our divorce, Preston could no longer decide which version of our marriage everyone was allowed to hear. Part 8. The audit confirmed the undisclosed debt and several misleading statements in Preston's financing materials. The company continued under temporary leadership so its employees would not lose their jobs. After mediation, Preston agreed to repay the $38,000 with interest and issue a written correction acknowledging my financial and operational contributions. Celeste ended the engagement. Weeks later, she sent me an apology that did not ask for forgiveness. The restaurant disciplined my manager and adopted a policy barring guests from selecting employees for personal reasons. They offered me my position back. I accepted for 3 months. Then I used Preston's repayment Gideon's fortune to enroll in the hospitality management program I had postponed years earlier. Gideon and I learned each other slowly. He never asked me to replace Lillian with him. The first time he visited her, he brought no lawyers and no expensive gifts. Just the old photograph of me with the bandage behind my ear. I lost her childhood, he told Lillian. You gave her one. Lillian wiped her eyes. I was afraid finding you would make her feel she had to choose. Gideon shook his head. I'm not here to erase the woman who stayed. Neither of them noticed that I was crying until I laughed. A year later, I helped Calder Hospitality launch a training program for women returning to work after divorce or years of caregiving, and for young adults leaving foster care. Gideon provided the funding. I designed the program. On opening night, we had dinner at table 12. Lillian sat on one side of me. Gideon sat on the other. I still wore the half-mid, but now Gideon's piece rested beside it on the chain. The break remained visible, because some things are not made whole by pretending. They were never broken. The Vale family had spent years telling everyone Preston rescued me. The bank records, the old emails, and the note in his own handwriting proved the opposite. I had been rescuing him, and the night I finally stopped, I found the father who had never stopped searching. God kept the mother who had never let me disappear.